perspective. So
that's good.
All right, so I'll let you take the stage and have at it. And these are the awesome kids behind us here.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So I'm in San Diego, and actually in Del Mar, near San Diego. That's where I live, near where I live. Where are you?
Iowa.
Iowa. Well, Iowa's on my mind a lot these days because I cover the presidential election, so I'm always writing about the 20 or so people running for president going through Iowa. Yeah. What sort of what questions do you have for me about editorial writing or writing in general?
Hi, Ruben.
Hi.
I'm Stephanie. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Stephanie.
Okay, so one of the things that the kids did today is they just narrowed down their topic that they plan to use for their written piece. And there is quite a variety. And what I think I'll do is I'll just have the front row go across and they can all say what their topic is. And then if you could give them advice on the process, how they should get started, what they should write about, what would be important elements to include in the editorial writing. So if I can go across the front row, we'll start with Ariana and go through. Tell them your topic.
Society pressure.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, the first one was what?
Society pressure.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, mine is dress codes.
Okay.
Cell phone use at school. Cell phone use in middle schools. Role models.
Animal abuse and rights. Middle schoolers being allowed to carry their cell phones.
Suicide.
Tobacco and vaping.
Okay.
So those would be some of the issues. They've all picked very serious issues, some that they've heard about in the area. So
Great, that's a good variety. So where I would jump in and I would say this, typically I write columns, which are 750 words. I've written over the many years about 2,000 of those. I've also written about 1,500 editorials at two different newspapers. And those editorials are typically about 600 words long. So your finished product, you should know, is probably going to be between 500 and 600 words. That's not a lot. It can't go on indefinitely, right? So you're going to get to the point very quickly. And what you're going to learn when you craft your editorial is you're going to be getting in and out of the material very quickly. No wasted words, no wasted sentences, because you really have to economize and use your words carefully. So in that regard, for instance, in some of the topics that we heard about, one common theme was cell phones, right? It's a good one. The use of cell phones in middle school, whether there should be rules at school prohibiting the use of cell phones, even the possession of cell phones. Should they require you to keep your cell phones in your locker? Where I would start is it always helps to start with some sort of a news peg. A news peg is something that's going on right now in the world, in Iowa, in your county, in your city, or in your state of Iowa, or maybe around the country, another state, where they're having this conversation because there's some controversy, right? Let's say if there's a school in Illinois or Indiana, a middle school, where they decide to pass a law or pass a policy at that school to ban cell phones altogether, right? And there's a conversation about it. So if you find that online, you'll be able to refer to that in your very first sentence or so. And why is that important? It's important because it brings the reader into the moment. It lets the reader know that you didn't just pull a topic out of thin air, but it's actually tied to something that's going on in the world right now. Now, the good news is in the era of Google, when I was your age, you'd have to go down to the library and go through periodic tables and the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature and find old magazine articles and the like. Here at the Google, you'll run a cell phone, high school ban, a high school policy or something, and you'll come up with all these stories. You pick the one that's most timely, that's closest to this time period of December 2015, and that'll be your lead. And then as you go through it, and you actually make the argument, you're going to think deeply about two sides of this argument. You're going to see basically who's proposing these cell phone bans and who's opposing them and the arguments for each. And then ultimately you're going to assess those and very quickly get to a conclusion. And the last, say, 100 words of the editorial are going to be you expressing your point of view, staking out a position. Do you think that the policy to ban cell phones at this particular school in Illinois is right or wrong? And either way, you defend it and you pick a side. And the whole thing of an editorial is it's not objective. It's not on the one hand or on the other hand. It actually stakes out a point of view. So to give you an example, if you're moving through the material very quickly, you have a peg at the beginning, you have some evidence on either side very quickly, and then you ultimately decide which one you're persuaded by. You stake out a position, end strong, and my own favorite technique at the end is to really stick the last sentence. Make sure the last sentence really hums and rings and is interesting to read, because it's the last thing they're going to read from you. Okay?
Okay.
Is there anybody that has a specific question for him? You know, thinking about their topic, does anybody have a specific question that they would like him to answer? Okay, go ahead, Cheney.
Well, like, how long does it usually take you to write your stories, or like, how long does it take you to research?
Okay, that's a really good question. Typically, the way it would work at most of the newspapers I worked at is you'd have a meeting at about 9:30 or 10. You get your assignment around 10:30, and it would be due. Certainly the draft of it, the first draft would be due by say 2 o'clock. So you've got maybe 4 hours in total. That includes the research time, any phone calls you have to make, maybe even a quick lunch break in there where you're eating at your desk if need be. But you're getting it to their boss by 2. Why? Because if it gets to the boss by 2, she'll get a chance to edit it and get it, trim it a little bit, fix it a little bit, polish it by 4, and then it starts going through the process by the copy editors by 6, and by 8, and by 10, and by 12 midnight. It's finally put on the page at 12 midnight, and it's printed, say from 12 to 2 in the morning. It's loaded on trucks at 2 or 3 in the morning, so it lands on your parents' front door, your front step in the morning. So it went from a concept, 12, 15 hours earlier to an actual editorial that's in the paper that next morning. So everything has to work out that way. If you're slow in delivering it, it backs up everything. So you really only have that window of anywhere, I'd say, between 3 and 4 hours to write the whole thing. You should also remember that when you start, a lot of people are really in a hurry to start writing, right? And I think that's a big mistake. You ought to spend that first hour really thinking, just quietly reading and thinking through this, maybe talking it over with your colleague, trying to get a sense for the complexity of the article, or of the argument, and the complexity of the issue. And maybe there is more, like on a topic like suicide. You mentioned, for instance, suicide. It doesn't always have to be suicide as we've understood it before. It can be tied to a particular instance that's been in the news, or something impacting high school students, or whatever. If you can take a topic that's been very well chewed over, whether it's the death penalty or gun control, and find some new innovative way to get into it.
Does anybody else have a question for him? Specific to their topic. Well, one of the things that I do want to tell you, Ruben, is thank you very much for giving us that time frame, because I think that when they find out that you have to do your articles within 6 hours, my 2-week and 3-week time frame doesn't quite sound so bad as a deadline. And right, I think that it also kind of enforces upon them how important the deadlines are, because you do have to move quickly.
Right. I got to tell you a funny story in that regard. My very first newspaper job, I was about 30 years old, and I was working for the Arizona Republic in Phoenix, Arizona. But I had been writing since I was 21, since I was in college. And I would write these op-ed pieces, and they would run in papers like the Los Angeles Times. And those sort of on your own schedule. So when I finally went to work for the Republic in Arizona, I got an assignment, and they said, well, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. When do you think you'll have it done? And I said, in a day or two. And my boss looked at me like he was horrified. Like, what have I just done hiring this person? And somebody else, a colleague, chimed in and said, hey, pal, it's a daily newspaper. Whatever you write is going to go in the paper tomorrow. So you don't have 2 days, you have 2 hours. And I thought, oh, man, there's a lot of pressure involved in that. An editorial can be, as I said, 500 words. It could be as short as 200 words. And I don't think there's a single day that I wrote editorials over those 10 years when I didn't recall the words of Mark Twain, where he said, I'm sorry my letter is so long, I didn't have time to write you a short one. It is so much harder to write a short editorial than to write a long one. You'll find that out.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and good luck as you continue with your presidential coverage. Will you be in Iowa watching any of the presidents?
I may well be. The Washington Post Writers Group keeps me busy on that front, and I may well find an excuse to get out there. I have a number of newspapers in Iowa that run my.
Can you still hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I'd
Okay.
love to get to Iowa. That would be great.
Okay. All right. Good luck. If you get to Bettendorf, we would love to have you come and visit our school. Thank
We'll
you
be in
very
touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. All right. Bye-bye.